This short video I'm going to cover one topic which is quite serious. It's about a police shooting and killing a man in a South Shields street. This was the first story I read in the Gazette, the local Shields Gazette, about a young lad, 24-year-old. He was allegedly in the street early hours of the morning waving what they describe as a firearm, a gun. Now, it's yet to come out in the wash what kind of gun that was meant to be, or was. But it states in the paper, in this paper, that the police said it was a non-police weapon. That's just police speak for saying mind your own business for now, you know. The kid was shot in the chest. Witnesses said they heard the police shouting, put down the gun, or put down the weapon. And then they heard shots. So I suppose some of those witnesses would probably say that the police did what they were meant to do, or what they had basically they had no option. Well, there's always options. Now, I'm not gonna. This isn't an all-out attack on the police, right? That's not what this video is about. But what it is about is an attack on the mindset of an institution that was set up basically to protect the public, right? Now, that's what we're being led to believe. Historical evidence shows otherwise. Basically, the police, or the modern police force anyway, was set up by Robert Peel, Sir Robert Peel, in the 1800s. And it's basically morphed into what it is today, which is more like, I would say, more like a paramilitary force. And the reason I say that is because most people will be unaware that the Ministry of Defence only a few years ago ordered 60,000 battlefield weapons for the police. Now, you've got to ask the question, why would the police want assault rifles? And also the article which I will put up on screen, and it was posted on the internet on several sites, but you wouldn't have seen this in the mainstream media because the mainstream media is corporate controlled. They don't want you to see this kind of thing. So what we're talking about here is police with Canadian, well, the preference was Canadian assault rifles. Whether they actually got them, I don't know. But they also specified, the police also specified, that they wanted these assault rifles basically to be certain specifications, and that was that they'd be capable of holding grenade launchers, silencers, and laser sighting, amongst other things. So you have to ask yourself, what are the police gearing up for? Sounds to me like they're gearing up for a hot war. But who's that war with? This is what we've got to ask ourselves here, right? Now, I'm not going to get into the subject of false flags and the so-called war on terrorism. I can do that in another video. In fact, I have covered it briefly in my videos on the Middle East and Syria, right? But basically, they use what's called crisis creation. And I'm not just talking about the police here, I'm talking about government agencies, governments. By the way, the name government, right? If you're not aware of this, the name government, the etymology of the word government, comes from the Latin Greek gubernare, right? Now, gubernare means basically to control, right? And the last part of government, ment, means mind. That's where you get the word mentis from, or mental. And so you put that together and you've got mind control. So government is actually a mind control mechanism, right? It's been set up to control the population, and there are higher interests that steer our governments. So don't think for 1 minute that we actually live in some kind of democratic society. Far from it. I'm not going to get into that subject either. The best man to look into, or at least watch his videos and his seminars, is a guy called Mark Passio. Now, Mark Passio covers many topics such as natural law, and also he has video seminars. You can get these freely available on YouTube, which cover the occult and satanic mockery of the police and military. Now, the reason he does this is because he knows firsthand, but he was actually getting it from the horse's mouth, because he actually admits that he was a high priest in the Church of Satan. But then when he realised the kind of hidden agendas that were going on, and that he'd basically seen the error of his ways, he decided to do these talks, these seminars, which again you can get freely on YouTube, right? Mark Passio he's called, P-A-S-S-I-O, and he's basically trying to get the word out to people that there is a big agenda, right? It's an occultist agenda, and the police and the military are continuously mocked by these occultists, right? And many of the leaders are occultists. Now, again, I'm not going to get into too much depth about that subject either, because this video is about the shooting of this young lad here, right? Now, I don't care what people say, right, or think about how, whether the police were doing the right thing or not, because once you know what the agenda is, you'll realise that the police are nothing but order followers, and the criteria for joining the police now has been lowered so much and altered, right, that many of your police, especially your so-called trained marksmen, right, the firearm squads, they have to have certain traits, right? Well, obviously one of those traits is not being afraid of killing your own kind, right? In other words, they will do it without hesitation. This is how they're trained, and as far as I'm concerned, they're conditioned, right, into basically abdicating their moral responsibility. And again, Mark Passio covers this in depth in his videos. I invite you to watch them. They're very eye-opening. And what we're seeing here is a particular mindset that's been spread amongst the police. It's been going on for many years now. They are becoming more and more institutionalized, right? And they believe that they have some kind of authority over the rest of the civilian population. Now, if you read or research the original founder of the police force, Sir Robert Peel, you'll find that he came up with the 9 principles of policing, or the Peelian principles as they're known as, right? Now, believe it or not many police even are aware of these, right? Unless I have actually done some studying. But I'll be honest with you, there's not many academics amongst the police, and that is the reason they're picked, because they follow orders and they don't ask questions, right? They do it without thinking. Well, let's be reminded of the Nazis and other dictatorships, dictatorial regimes, where basically those high rankers or officers, the military, the police, always used the get-out clause. We were only following orders. Well, just about every atrocity known to mankind throughout the ages have been committed by people just following orders, right? And this is what Mark Passio covers again. He talks about the order followers, the police and the military, where basically they abdicate their moral responsibility. They don't accept any moral culpability for carrying out the actions that cause harm, injury or death and suffering to others, right? Because they always find some kind of justification, right? The moral relativists would love this, right? This argument. But I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to be drawn into that. Basically, again, it's about the police shooting this guy, right? And it's becoming more prevalent around the country. It's a kind of like a mission creep, a function creep. Now, while they were telling you about this incident in this paper, and this is becoming more common as well. It's a tactic used by the media and the police, right, and the governments, basically to sway people's minds, right? It is a form of conditioning. On the same page where they're telling you, right, about what happened, you'll notice there's an article there, right, just here, right, and it's actually saying police reveal shocking gun statistics, right? Now, what they've managed to do over time is blur the lines, right? Because what they're talking about here, right, the majority of arrests and convictions, or even just charges for these so-called firearms, are all to do with air guns, right, or BB guns, imitation firearms. They're not actual firearms. But when you word it in such a way that you can actually con the public into thinking we're talking about dangerous weapons here, well, let's just remind people, right, if they don't understand this simple fact, right, that a gun, actual live ammunition that fires live ammunition, a gun is only a dangerous weapon, right, when it's in fact it's not a dangerous weapon. It's the man that's pulling the trigger, or the woman that's pulling the trigger. They're the ones, right, that are the danger, right? Not the gun itself. You can stick a bread knife in somebody's hand and it can be benign, right? It's just a bread knife. That's what it's used for cutting bread and buttering bread, right? But put it in the hands of a maniac or somebody that's, got mental issues, then it becomes a dangerous weapon. The same as a house brick or a pencil for that matter. So the way they tar guns, right, as dangerous weapons, right, well, obviously they mustn't think they're dangerous in the hands of firearms squads and police officers, right? So they're not dangerous then, are they? No, then they become tools, right? But this is what we've got to understand, folks. They will use certain language to blag the public, the general population, into thinking that all guns are dangerous. And they're having these same issues in America right now because the Obama administration and others, no doubt, other administrations before and future administrations are trying to disarm the American population. And one thing that always happens when a country or a government manages to disarm the population, right, then the real atrocities start. Now, I'm just being blunt here, right? The fact is, you only have to look at the Nazis, right? Hitler issued decrees, right, basically calling for all citizens to hand in their guns, right? Just before he started his persecution of the Jews, Christians, and the communists, right? It wasn't just Jews that got persecuted. It was Christians and communists and other groups as well, minority groups. So the first thing a government, a despotic government, a dictatorial government, right, and that's the signs you've got to look for, folks, right? The first things a bad government will do, or has to do, is disarm the population. Now, it wasn't just the Nazis did it. Stalin and Lenin did it when the Bolsheviks basically took over from the Tsarist family in Russia. They also disarmed the population. And look what happened under Stalin regime. 40 million Russians wiped out, right? Now, this happens every time a government disarms its population. So there's the signs, folks, right? You've got a lot of shock horror. You've had it for years in the tabloids. Remember, the media is corporate controlled, right? And they're following an agenda. So this young kid here, right? Again, it'll probably come out in the wash that young 24-year-old, right, was a mixed up kid. He's probably on drugs and drink. I'm only assuming here, I'm not saying for definite, but he was probably, he's probably been to a party or something like that at a house and had drink and drugs. And to be honest, to me, and I'm no psychologist, I would never want to be either, right? But it seems to me as though this kid was doing it for a cry for attention, right? And that's probably most cases when you hear about these lads and lasses basically brandishing knives or weapons in the street, right? I'm pretty certain that the police could deal with it in a different way, right? I've got no doubt in my mind, in fact, because before police were armed or had firearms units, they did deal with it in a different way. They used negotiators, right? And most cases they managed to win over the situation and disarm or basically get those disturbed people to put down the weapons, right? I'm not saying it happened in all cases, but and I wouldn't know the statistics on that. But what I'm saying to you is this: the police now seem very quick, right, to well, basically they've got itchy trigger fingers, right, and they seem to have no compunction now, no hesitation in pulling that trigger, right? In other words, and sometimes I think this is kind of like an unofficial I think this is coming from above, right? I think basically the police are being told that you can shoot to kill and ask questions later, right? Now, as far as I'm concerned, this isn't about instilling fear in criminals, right? Because this young lad, looking at him, right, and I am from that area, right? I don't know the kid personally, but there's no real hardened criminals in South Tyneside. Not really, right? And you very rarely hear, I don't remember, apart from the lad, I believe it was in Manchester, where he went off and killed those two police women, right? I think that was a kind of like a one-off. You don't hear many cases where criminals are firing on police. It's usually criminal on criminal, right? That's usually the case when it comes to gun-related crimes, and it's mostly in inner cities and that, right? But what you're seeing now is an escalation in police shootings. Right? It's been going on for some time. Also, you're seeing and you're hearing in the media that they're pushing for the nationwide deployment of tasers, given them to all police officers, right? Now, if you notice, over time, whenever they introduce these weapons, right, where first it was the batons and the CS gas, then it was the tasers, they always start off with a trial period, right? That trial period could last 6 months to a year, and they'll use certain forces or certain elements of certain forces in the country, and then they introduce it nationwide. Sorry. So what you're talking about here is what could be known as an incremental program, an incrementalist program, and it goes on over decades sometimes, right? Where what they will do is they'll introduce a weapon to the police on a trial basis, knowing fine well, right, that later on they're going to introduce it nationwide, right? It's going to be fully implemented. And it doesn't matter what you're talking about. They do it at political levels as well. They did it with the DNA profiling. And remember when Michael Howard was the Home Secretary under the Tory government, the last Tory government, right? Michael Howard brought in DNA profiling, right? Introduced the bill, got it passed, but he said at the time that it would only be used for serious crimes like murder, rape, robbery, armed robbery. And yet when the bill was introduced, it turned out that it was right across the board for minor crimes as well. Now you are seeing young kids being basically accosted on the street by police officers, usually for no reason. They haven't done anything wrong, and they're usually arrested, and then the DNA is being taken. Now that goes back decades before, right? This is what I'm talking about here. The DNA profiling was already on the shelf waiting to be pulled out. And I read a book in the 1980s called Big Brother, Surveillance in Our Society, where it discussed the databases that they were already setting up, and that the police had a target of 500,000 a year to put for DNA profiling, right? To build that database up, and eventually it was going to cover the whole population, the whole British population. And this is going on worldwide, by the way, folks. So what we're talking about is, like I said, it's an incrementalist program, right? Whether it's arming the police, and we're talking about police state apparatus here, folks, right? And they will use excuses or reasons, often spurious reasons, right? Arguments for introducing, whether it's legislation or bringing in certain kinds of weapons, right? And basically what they're doing is they're fully militarising the police, right? And remember what I said, the criteria for the police now, they're looking for certain traits. They want those police to follow orders, right? They want them to follow orders without asking questions. Now, how many times or how often is this going to happen, right? Or how frequent is it when is it going to get to the stage where police will shoot your daughter or your son or my son, right? Then we'll finally turn around and see what the real program is, right? And how far it's going. Now these institutions like the police, right, over decades, right, over a very long time, basically have been conditioned, right, through the training. And I'm not saying all police are the same, right? Certain elements of the police are basically hand-picked, groomed for specific tasks, right? Now, a lot of them are desensitised. I can point to a book I read years ago called Inside Job by a Dr. Malcolm Young, right? Now, he was a police officer, ranking police officer for 30 years. He served in Market Street, Newcastle, and also Shields, Kettle Street, over his career. And he took secret field notes about the attitudes of the police force in general, right? And basically what he said was, and the book was called Inside Job, and he took secret field notes throughout his career, and basically what he said was there was always a them and us attitude with the police, and they had certain names for, you know, members of the population, members of the civilian population. So basically from joining the force they were indoctrinated into this them and us attitude. And you see this amongst a lot of institutions, especially the prison service and the military, right, where they become desensitized, and they no longer feel as though they're part of the civilian population, right? Again, this is the them and us attitude, right? And it is a form of conditioning. Secondly, you'll notice that the police force, like other government institutions, they seem to have set up a kind of language of their own, right? You know, it might sound officious, but most of it's bullshit, right? It sounds as though they're speaking from an authoritative point of view, right? But it's just a twist on normal words. That's all. They seem to enmesh themselves in the world of legalese, right? And legalese itself is a language of its own, right? Created by the lawyers, and you know, and often when you listen to them on interviews on the media and that, they sound very robotic, mechanistic, right? And you can tell that's part of the mind control that they're under, the brainwashing, right? Now, again, like I said, I'll repeat it again. Mark Passio covers this in his videos. He's got one called the cult of ultimate evil, the cult of order followers, and the satanic mockery of the police and military. And this is what the police, or the majority of the rankers anyway, the low rankers, are totally oblivious to, right? Even the regalia they wear, you know, when I say the regalia, the uniforms and the badges, right, have significance, right? They are occultic symbols. I'll give you an example, and again, Mark Passio covers this in all his seminars, right? The badge on the hat, right, that they wear, which is basically, it's 2 squares, right? 2 squares basically superimposed on each other, right? It actually represents the hypercube. I'm not going to go into that now, but it is occultic, right? Also, the symbolism that surrounds the police and military in the badges and the uniforms and the flags, right, basically is steeped in occultism. Now, most police officers won't have a clue about this, right? But the badges that they have on the heads, basically right there on the third eye, right? There's some significance in that, right? They have the band on the cap, the police cap, which is checkered, black and white, right? That represents the Masonic tracer board, right? The black and white checkered floor, which represents duality, right? Now, you tell a police officer this, you won't have a clue what you're talking about, right? The average citizen doesn't know about this, but Mark Passio covers it in depth, right, in his seminars. And basically what he's telling you is this, that the police and military are being mocked by their leaders, right? Now let's just point something out here, right? And again, Mark Passio covers this in his videos. I invite you to go and watch them. They're very, very significant, right? And our police and military are known as the pets, or the dogs, right? This is the occultists, the leaders, who are basically laughing at them. You're saying, you will do what we tell you to do, right? And that's the whole idea behind it. They will follow orders. They are the house slaves. We are the slaves. In fact, Mark Passio says that the occultists, the leaders of the governments and the other hierarchical institutions, basically are all occultists. They can either be Satanists or Luciferians, right? And basically it's steeped in symbology, right? In symbolism. And basically we are known as the dead, because they say, well, we'll never rise above base consciousness. We're too busy watching fucking Jeremy Kyle and X Factor, right? And talking about football and that, right? We're never going to basically evolve spiritually, right? Evolve into a higher conscious awareness, right? So they call us the dead. The police and the military, they call them their dogs or their pets, which is why the military wear dog tags. You know, ask the average soldier about that, he wouldn't see the significance. He doesn't know the real reason or the real motives, right? So what we're talking about here is the police basically acting like house slaves. Now, in the old, you know, when we're talking about the slave trade gone back centuries, you had the slaves, right? Then you had the house slaves. Now, the house slaves were given that little bit more freedom or a little bit more authority to do the dirty on the slaves, basically, to watch the rest of them. So they were kind of like a police in themselves, but they committed atrocities against their own kind to get that little bit extra freedom, right? Or a little bit more pittance, you know? And this is what the police are doing, basically. No different. For that little bit wage, that little bit security, and that assumed authority over the rest of the slaves, right? They will carry out sometimes heinous crimes, right? And it's recorded, folks. I've actually got it. There is websites you can go to. You can find where many police around the country are being charged and convicted of some horrendous crimes, including paedophilia, and other sex crimes and drug dealing and violence, rape. They're no different from the general population, folks, but you see, the way the institution is run, the average police officer believes, and I'm going back to the Peelian principles here, by the way, right? The 9 Peelian principles, one of them states that a police constable, right, has only the same powers of arrest as any other civilian, right? And that the uniform that they're given and the badge basically gives them very limited powers, right? It gives them very limited powers, and basically they are allotted, right? They are allotted time, their time to police the general population by consent of the general population, right? So basically what it means is if we don't consent to the way they are policing, then we don't have to obey anything. In fact, we don't have to obey them anyway. If we're not committing a crime, right, if we're going about with lawful business, this is common law, folks, right? You need to read up on common law as well. Then basically you can go about your lawful business without being impeded or accosted by police, right? And this is what we're talking about here. The police seem to think they have some kind of assumed authority over the rest of the slaves, when in actual fact all they've been doing, or all they've been given, is a little bit extra assumed authority, right? But they're only meant to do it by consent, right? And they're meant to basically stay within certain remits, right? They're not meant to exceed their scope of office, which is often happening now. I mean, again, these weapons that they're deploying now, right? Especially tasers, they're becoming more widespread, and they're actually they're using them as torture compliance weapons. They were, when they were first introduced, again, it's incremental. We were told, the general population were told that to allay your fears, that they would only be used in exceptional circumstances. And now you're seeing them be more widely used across the general population, more and more often. They're even being used on kids as young as 6 for not complying, right? Now that's dangerous. That is a dangerous precedent, right? And they seem to be doing it more and more often. In America, it's rife. They're killing people left, right and centre with these torture compliance weapons, right? And what they do is they try to acclimatise the public to what's coming, right? And they will use certain tactics. As I said, they use the media, the propaganda machine, to try and allay people's fears, or they will play up fear. They will propagate fear to say, look, we need to introduce these kind of weapons. And the police are often demanding now, right? Now, when the police were first set up originally, right, they were meant to be autonomous from government, totally autonomous from government, not interfere in the lawmaking, right, because they were meant to be, well, they were meant to be peacekeepers, right? Now they've become enforcers of law, right? And remember what I said about government, what it stands for: mind control. It's a control mechanism, and basically all the police are part of that control mechanism, right? So they become more enforcers than peace officers, right? This is what we've got to understand, folks. It's a kind of like a bait and switch, what they're pulling on with. The police have become more militarised over time. They're becoming more desensitised over time towards the general population, lest they forget where they come from, because they went to they grew up in the same neighbourhoods as us, and they went to the same schools, and yet when you see them out on the streets accosting people, often for no reason, you tend to forget that they were from the same species sometimes, right? Now, again, I'm not saying all police officers are like that. A lot of them are out there trying to do a good job, and basically uphold the law, right, or maintain the peace, which is originally what their remit was. But now they've become more like corporate enforcement officers, right, inflicting penalties on the general population, whether it's for speeding. It's become a revenue collection service with basically the threat of violence behind it. And let's make no bones about that, folks. Police will use the threat of violence. If you decide, or they decide, sorry, we've got an uppity slave here who knows his rights or her rights, then they will use that threat of force against you, right? Now, I don't care what you say, I don't care what people believe out there. They want the slave, you know what I mean? If they want to continue with that slave mindset and get on and lick the boots of these people, right? Well, that's up to you. But I've never been that way, right? I'd rather mediate, right? If I could, you know, if that was possible. But sometimes they don't leave any room for mediation, right? As I said, it's the mindset. You are the slave and we are your masters. Well, yeah, I'll tell you what is, you can stick that up your arse and all, right? Because nobody's my master, right? As far as I'm concerned, my family, right, and the general population, right, you're not slaves, right? And providing you stay within the law, right, the common law I'm talking about, and it's very simple, the common law, right? There's basic tenets, right, basic principles of common law. And you abide by them, you can go about and do anything you want, right? But more and more, increasingly so, over the years, you're seeing more and more statute, right? More and more man-made laws being passed down from Parliament, right? And of course, the police are there to make sure them laws are complied with, right? Well, again, we're not slaves, right? And personally speaking, and I've already had this, I've had run-ins with the police before, right? I'm pretty well known to them, right? And to be honest, there's no love lost between them. I have covered in another video about the police communication system, the emergency comm, right, system that they use called Tetra, right? And I've tried to warn them about that, right? How it's causing cancers and basically mental illness in many police officers, right? And the population in general as well, because Tetra is inescapable. It's microwave and it's connected to the Wi-Fi communications networks. I've tried to warn them about this, so it's not all about, I'm not being particularly hostile towards the police. That's not my goal. That's not my aim. It's about awareness. It's about education. And I want the police to know that they're being used as well, right? As well as the military. Now again, I'm going to point towards Mark Passio's videos, which are highly enlightening. And I want you to understand this, folks, that if we don't hold the police and the government accountable for their actions, right? And by the way, the IPCC, right, the International Panel on Police Complaints Committee, sorry, right, is a stitch up itself, because it's not independent at all. It has ranking police officers on. Basically, it's the fox's guarding the hen house. That's what it is. Police policing themselves, right? And that's dangerous in itself. So you're not going to get anywhere through normal so-called complaint procedures. It's about the police. It's about the public, the grassroots level of awareness, and basically it's about education, not just of the police, but of the public themselves. We're not the enemy, right? The police was originally formed, right, supposedly as an institution that will protect the public, right? Instead, it's seen more and more as a malevolent force, and that is how it's designed, folks, right? They become a control mechanism. That's what it was designed for, right? So we've got to understand that. And as I said earlier on about the original formation of the modern police force, it was meant to be autonomous from government, but more and more you see groups like the ACPO, the Association of Chief Police Officers, which actually is a private corporation. It's an organisation. It's never been audited, right? It's corrupt to the core, and yet it lobbies government for a change in laws, especially when it affects the police force, right? And ultimately, them laws affect the population, right? The general population. So now we have a police force which and a police federation that dictates policy through governments, right? And many of them ministers who are in there, they're just the minions of other hidden interests like the banks and corporations, right? They don't serve the interests of the British population. And basically they will do the bidding of all these lobbyist groups, especially the police, right? Now, once that starts happening, folks, you have basically the birth of a police state. And this has been going on for some time now, right? As I said, they're becoming more militaristic. It is a form of function creep that many of the general population are blissfully unaware that it's going on, right? Because they see this so-called war on terror, which is a fraud in itself. Again, I'm not going to cover the false flag theory, Hegelian dialectic. You can watch that in other videos like Syria, the one I did on Syria. But the fact is that we are being, at least our police are being more militarised as time goes on. They're given more and more powers. Basically the powers are unprecedented now. I mean the surveillance, and it isn't just about the police, it's about the intelligence agencies as well, like MI5, who are given absolute carte blanche to do what they want as far as snooping's concerned and data retention, stealing people. They basically troll all the social media sites for information, personal information on people, and they are saving that data. They are collecting it and it's going on to databases. Again, I'm not going to cover that because this is the main topic I wanted to cover about police shooting this kid. What we have to look at, folks, is the root causes behind this, right? Why are these kids, right, 24-year-old, right, why are these kids doing what they're doing, right? They need help. Instead he's lying in a morgue now, you know. This is the crazy thing about it. Every single individual on this planet, right, was born with certain inalienable rights, human rights. None of us were born with silver spoons in our mouths, right, or crowns on our heads, although the royal family would believe that, right? They believe they're ruled by divine right, and there's certain elements of society that believe that they're better than the rest of us. But the truth is immutable, unchangeable. We are all born with the same basic human rights, right? They can't be taken away unless we consent to it. We don't delegate authority to anyone. We're sovereign individuals. And that, by the way, includes the right to bear arms, right? Why is it that only a few thousand miles away, right, across the other side of the Atlantic, there's roughly 300 million Americans, and most of them are armed, right? Now, their US Constitution and the Second Amendment, by the way, the right to bear arms, and I didn't care about these Dudley Do-Rights who say, oh, guns are, I've already said, guns aren't dangerous in themselves, it's the one that's holding the trigger, right? Now, the US Constitution, the First Amendment, is basically the freedom of speech, right? The right to say what you feel you have a right to say, right? And it was Voltaire that said, I might not like what you say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it, right? Now that's the First Amendment of the US Constitution, right? The Second Amendment is the right to bear arms. And the reason it is the Second Amendment is to protect the First Amendment, right? Now, most military and police officers, law enforcement in the US, take an oath to the Constitution, right? To defend the Constitution against enemies foreign and domestic. Now, what that actually means is government, right? When you get a despotic government, right, or a hostile government, then at least you have an armed population to defend themselves. This is why around the globe, over centuries, over ages, the populations have been disarmed by their own governments, right, before they carried out the atrocities. This is what you got to understand. In this country, Tony Blair, the warmonger, the criminal, the psychopath, gets into power, done blaine, right? Shock horror all over the. At the end of the day, it was a horrible situation. What happened there was a horrible incident, right? Where those young kids were killed by that nut job, who, by the way, had connections with police and Freemasons, right? And you can look into the false flag theory there. I'm not going to go into that. That's another argument altogether. But practically overnight, the Blair government disarmed the population, right? Now, the US Constitution is basically born out of the British or the UK Magna Carta, right? Goes back to 1215, King John, right? And subsequent bills after that, such as the Bill of Rights 1629 and 1689, which actually gave the UK population, or the English population at least, the right to bear arms. In fact, it was an obligation for every household, right, in the land to have some form of weaponry to defend the realm. Now, this has been, again, it's been usurped, right, in this country. They always use some kind of tactic like a false flag to instill fear in the general population in order to push their part of their agenda, which is, in this case, we're talking about disarmament, right? So, now common sense tells you, right, that if you had an armed population, like they do in Switzerland, by the way, the most democratic country on the planet, right, every household has a duty and obligation to be armed, right? They have weapons in every single household, right? And basically, it's, as I said, it's the most democratic country on the planet. So what's good for Switzerland should be good for the rest of the globe. Why is it that thousands of miles away across the Atlantic Ocean, hundreds of millions of Americans are allowed to carry firearms, and yet just over the water we aren't? And that goes for a lot of countries now around the globe, where they've had the guns taken away from them by the governments. And basically what I'm saying is, folks, every single individual on this planet has a right to protect themselves and their families and the communities in general. So common sense would tell you that criminals would think twice about committing crimes, especially heinous crimes, serious crimes like rape and murder, right? Especially if they were armed. They would think twice about going into a house or a village or a town where they knew all the citizens were armed. And that is the case in America, in many American states, where people have the right to open carry or even conceal carry, right? Gun-related crime is very low, if existent at all, because the criminals know, or the armed criminals know, that what they would be coming up against if they ran into a shop or a bank or a house where they knew the citizens were armed. So gun-related crime is very low in them areas. This is what the government won't tell you, right? In this country, if there is gun crime, right, most of it, and it is very low, folks, it's just typed up by the media and the police and the government, right? They fill the statistics, I always have done. So what we're talking about here is that if there's any gun crime in this country, most of it is criminal gangs shooting at each other, right? You do have armed robberies, but they're very few and far between now because of the surveillance technology that's coming in and other methods of thwarting crime. But what I'm saying here is, folks, I'm going to sum up by saying every single one of us as individuals have a right to protect our life and property, right? We have a right to protect the life of our neighbour, our family, our friends, right? And the police force is basically being set up as I said, as a control mechanism. The police force is set up as a control mechanism, nothing more, right? It's to keep the rest of us where they want us, basically. And they will use the threat of violence. This is what governments and police forces do, right? They now have the monopoly of violence over the general populations, and it's up to us now to assert our authority as individuals, as sovereigns, right? We've got to say enough's enough, right? Now, I'm not saying that the police force, right, we're not expecting it, you know, in the near future to sort of like be disbanded overnight, right? But at the end of the day, we can police ourselves, right? We just have to take on that mantle of responsibility. We don't need a police force that's becoming more increasingly militaristic and authoritarian as time goes on, because this will be the legacy we'll leave future generations, right? This is the plan. This is the hidden agenda. So this is what we're going to understand. And it's not about confrontation. It's not about confronting the police. It's about educating them as well. As I said, people like Mark Passio are trying to point out to them, you're being ridiculed, you're being mocked, right, by your own leaders, right? There is occultism involved. There is Satanism involved, right? And to those out there in the general population who are that naive to believe, right, or not believe that this is going on, right? And that goes for police officers as well. You need to open your eyes and do a little bit more research, right? That's all I'm. And the craziest thing of all is this, that we all have to live amongst each other. Now, the police out there, right, have families themselves. They have sons and daughters and wives and mothers and brothers and sisters, right? They are actually putting chains around their necks as well, right? So, you know, you go and join the police force, you get your uniform and your badge, and you know, you get this assumed authority over the rest of the slaves, right? That's the mindset that's been created. And basically you're being brainwashed into thinking that that is the right way, right? But then what does that say about your family? I mean, I often wonder, you know, when you take that uniform off and you go home, do you talk to your wives and your children the way you talk to the average kid on the street, right? Or the average adult on the street, you know, with this assumed authority, right? We're talking about an absence of moral culpability here, folks, right? Again, for the sake of repeating myself, I'll point you to Mark Passio's videos. Moral culpability, right? Who carries out the actions? The police officer that killed that kid, right? He will have it on the conscience. If he's got a conscience, he'll have it on his conscience for the rest of his life. But they always seek to justify their actions, right, by saying, look, I was only following orders. It was my job, right? Now, that kid, as far as I'm concerned, wasn't even a threat, right? Now, I wasn't there. But in most cases, you usually find out afterwards, right, that it was a BB gun, right, which is basically useless, right? It's just a toy, right? I mean, it can cause damage in certain circumstances, but it's still just a BB gun. It's not a major threat to the community, you know. And then more and more often now, you'll see the police acting without any like I said, moral conscience, right? They'll just shoot and ask questions later. And because they seem to get away with it more often, right, this will continue, it will escalate. So again, it's back to moral culpability. Most of these coppers will justify their actions by saying, well, you know, I was just doing my job, following orders. Well, if that's the case, then they basically abdicate moral responsibility, right? Because it's their actions as a human being, right, as an individual that count. It doesn't matter who, you know. Again, Mark Pashew covers this argument excellent, right? He does an excellent argument about this, right, where he says you have the order givers, right, and the order followers, which are the police and military. The order givers, obviously, the politicians and the police commissioners, right? And basically, he says, who are more morally culpable? The order givers or the order followers? Well, the order givers only speak, right, those words. You know, they don't carry out the actions, but they speak the orders into existence, right? The order follower has a moral responsibility, right, to question those orders, right? To question those orders. And ultimately, it's the order follower that carries out those actions that cause death and injury. So whether it's a cop or a soldier, right, who says, oh, well, my actions didn't cause that death or that injury, right? Well, I'm sorry, you know, I beg to differ there. But it is your actions that directly caused that death or that suffering, that injury. So I'm going to end it there anyway, basically, right? I'm going to say that people now need to educate themselves about natural law, right? About who is really behind these hidden agendas, right? And that the police themselves, especially the low rankers, the ones actually on the beat, the soldiers, right? The dogs, as the occultists call them, they need to educate themselves as well about this, right? Because we'll all can see where this is heading if it isn't nipped in the bud, so to speak. So I'm going to leave it there. I'll see you in the next video.